Welcome to the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast, where we talk with martial arts practitioners about their histories and the influence that their practice of martial arts has on their lives. You are listening to the free version of this podcast, which is abbreviated. Help support this program by considering to subscribe to us on Patreon, where you will get 4 full-length podcasts each month, 1 week before the YouTube release date. The cost is that of about 1 coffee shop coffee per month. Go to www.patreon.com/malmag to subscribe. That is www.patreon.com/malmag. If you would like to purchase single full-length episodes of the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast, visit our Gumroad page at malmag.gumroad.com, and that is malmag.gumroad.com. This week I sat down in Marina Del Rey at the Doubletree MDR with a fascinating visitor from the UK, Sid Siddiqui, who is in for instructor camp at the Inosanto Academy. Sid is a veteran of the war in Afghanistan, serving as a doctor for the military of the United Kingdom. He talks about his history in the martial arts, a very fascinating story. Sit back and enjoy. Welcome to the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast, and today I'm sitting down in Marina Del Rey at the Doubletree Hotel, not far from the Inosanto Academy of Martial Arts, and I'm catching up with an old friend of mine who's in town from the United Kingdom, and he's here for the instructor camp that we just had, and then he's one of those that likes to hang out a little bit afterwards and do a few extra classes, and this is, his name is Joshua Siddiqui, but he goes by Sid, so I'll call him by whatever name he wants for the podcast. What do you prefer?
Oh, hi Tim, thank you for the introduction. Yeah, Sid is great. For some reason it's a nickname that's stuck with me for a long time.
Yeah, it fits you.
And all my martial arts buddies kind of still call me Sid, so it seems to kind of sounds like the neighbor's dog's name, but
right.
It works well.
No, that's funny. Now, the one thing I think I learned about you maybe 2 or 3 visits ago that I didn't realize, you're a doctor. Yeah?
That's right.
A medical
that's
doctor.
Right. Yes,
Okay.
Family physician, or in England we call it a general practitioner.
Okay.
I think they prefer the term family physician over here a bit more, but sometimes I believe that term is also used. So a bit of a jack of all trades and a master of none.
Or the first
like
face, I guess, that and the way our system works anyway, that's what you see first, and they say, oh, you've got this, here's what I can do for you, but now you need to go see this specialist.
That's it, yeah. So so that's right. We call it, in England, we sort of divide between primary care and sort of secondary care. So absolutely, the primary care hub is the GPs and advanced nursing practitioners and paramedics and so forth. And there's still quite a bit we can manage within the primary care setting. Certain ailments, that don't require people to go into hospital, be admitted into hospital or have surgery, that kind of thing. So we do manage quite a lot of conditions, let's say, within that primary care setting. But quite often, as you say, we need to signpost people into the secondary care. And our health system is quite different, so it's not a sort of insurance-based, although there are people who have that. There is a sort of National Health Service, which I know is under a lot of strain at the moment. But essentially, there's sort of rationing with that, and there's protocols and guidelines about, referral guidelines as to what's appropriate for us to refer and what isn't. So, for instance, to just give an example, sadly, in the UK, cosmetic procedures are now not available. The majority are not available on the NHS, the National Health Service, because that's deemed cosmetic. So, therefore, it's not affecting in any other way other than your appearance or your vanity. Now, I would actually argue that for some people that is really not true, because it has a more deeper psychological effect on their...
Right. Or what about a burn victim?
Exactly. So therefore that would be outside of just a cosmetic procedure. If someone, for instance, I was thinking more who wanted maybe a facelift or...
Oh, okay.
Or something that is purely sort of considered sort of cosmetic, But absolutely you're right. If someone is... has suffered with burn injuries and they need plastic surgery for restoration and skin grafting and those sort of procedures, then absolutely they would qualify on the NHS for for that kind of treatment. But purely cosmetic procedures, then they wouldn't. But having said that, some of my patients would then end up becoming depressed and then becoming very low, and then needed to be sometimes medicated for a depression that's a result of their.
So then, in the end, you got to figure what's the long-term cost versus the short-term cost. Is it costing us more to treat a depression than it is to?
That's it.
Just take a few wrinkles off their chin. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there's certainly arguments for and against things like that.
Right.
But the other thing with my practice that you may or may not remember is that I went through med school. I did a military cadetship, so I served in the British Army for 12 years.
Oh.
So essentially, they won't take you on in the first 2 years of med school. And then in London, where I studied, it was popular to do a third year intercalated degree, and then your 3 clinical years, so 6 years of university. But the Army would then do a cadetship and effectively sponsor you in those 3 clinical years. And then you have to give a return of service, after that. So I served for a total of 12 years, and that included an operational deployment to Afghanistan in 2008.
Oh wow!
And that was 6 months, and very very nerve-wracking at times. But I was very proud to serve my Queen and country at that time, and certainly there was a significant element of danger within that. Although obviously I was part of the medical chain, and my role was to help people, thankfully, and not have to do anything. Any war fighting as such. There was certainly, quite a degree of danger. And I was stationed in Camp Bastion, which at the time was a huge camp in the desert, had a 4-mile perimeter.
Oh wow!
Incredible infrastructure that they were able to develop. And then in the beginning, they sort of start off with tents, and then they develop and expand the camp, and then they develop what they call sort of tier 3 hard standing facilities. So we had like a corrugated iron base hospital that was built there on Camp Bastion to the cost of £30 million. So what's that times 1.2? Call it $40 million or thereabouts. Maybe a little more. And you had within that facility an emergency room or emergency department, 2 operating theatres, a 4-bed intensive care unit facility, and that's very intense 1-to-1 care. An imaging suite is replete with an MRI scanner, CT scanner, the mobile X-ray machines, incredible facilities. And then we had 2 wards. One was called a medical ward, another surgical ward, although most of our patients sadly were surgical because of the nature of the injuries that were happening.
Right.
And then we had a dispensary where they had all the medications, a physiotherapy department, the primary care consulting rooms at the other end where me and my buddies would be kind of working from most of the time, and even some dental suites as well. I think I had about at least 3 or 4, again with all of the kit that they need. But when there were the mass casualty situations, we would all be called in. So literally about once a month or so, we'd be called forward to help with the mass casualties. I don't know what the sort of age of the listeners are typically. I would
say it's probably a wide variety of people from, I don't know if we're getting any teenage listeners, but I'd say either 20s to 70s.
Well, I hope no one's particularly squeamish, but we did obviously deal with gunshot wounds, but more severe injuries with from the result of explosions, or what we call IEDs, improvised explosive devices, with people with ended up becoming amputees, and very harrowing, but very rewarding to be able to help people like that. And some of the technology was really developing. We had these specialized, what they called MERT teams, so medical emergency response teams, where they would take an intensivist, they call them intensive practitioner, intensive care practitioner, senior doctor, a critical care sort of paramedic trained sort of individual, and sometimes even a surgically qualified individual, and assistance on this helicopter to the victim of the IED strike, and administer some interventions. They called it the golden hour. So because the risks of dying were sort of were slightly different to what would be considered normal first aid. In first aid, they teach you, priorities are airway, breathing, circulation, which is usually, typically in the civilian world, we would see those kind of things, and you protect it, open the airway, make sure someone's breathing, restore circulation, and so on. But in the sort of war-fighting situation in Afghanistan, catastrophic hemorrhage, severe bleeding, from the limb blown off, was going to kill you before your airway. So if you're too focused on keeping someone airway, but they bleed out, of course, then that's completely different. So, and they're developing some incredible technologies. They called them novel hemostatics. So you had things like quick clot powder, which could be sprinkled onto a wound, and it comes from volcanic ash.
Oh, wow.
And it causes this thermogenic reaction that triggers a clotting cascade.
Oh, wow.
Extraordinary stuff. It was featured in, I want to say it was featured in a film with Mark Wahlberg.
The Three Kings?
Was it Shooter?
Okay. Yeah,
it might be that one where essentially he's shot, and I think he ends up in the back of a police car or something like that, and he finds a first aid kit and he pours this powder into the wound, and people might not have known what he was doing, but that essentially is, I think, is meant to represent this novel hemostatic called quick clot.
Oh, wow.
And then the other thing, they had these Hemcon bandages, which essentially was similar, but the special bandages that were sort of had a special layer of something similar substance, so you could apply pressure with one of those bandages, and not only are you getting the sort of the tamponade effect from the pressure of the bandage, but also this cascade reaction, the clotting reaction. So we were very, very lucky. I'll never forget, we served alongside other sort of United Nations forces, and particularly Americans. I remember very fondly working with some of the US Marine Corps.
Wow.
And great guys and girls, and very fit individuals, of course, as well. I was serving alongside the parachute regiment at the time, 2 para and 3 para, and again they're a little feisty.
Wow.
But I'll never forget this one US Marine who must have been in his early 20s, and he was, there was an IED strike. And again, please, my apologies if there's any squeamish listeners, but the chap, his right leg was blown off at the hip, left leg blown off below the knee. I think he lost a testicle in the process. And he was ashen. I mean, he looked as white as a ghost,
Right.
And I have to say, obviously the MERT team went out to him, and they did the damage limitation and did everything they could to stop the bleeding and preserve him, get him to the emergency department. And so we were sort of rushed forward to help, and I think it was my job on that occasion to establish intravenous access to get a large cannula into the vein. So just to give you an idea, for an adult male, the hemoglobin volume should be between 130 to 180 for a healthy male, and it was somewhere between that sort of figure. I think this individual, his has dropped down to, I want to say, 20 to 30.
Wow.
Staggering,
Wow.
And he had over 30.
What's a hemophiliac usually?
So hemophiliac so that's a person who has a clotting problem.
Okay, so it's not like a low of that particular thing.
No,
okay,
it's part of the clotting cascade.
Gotcha. Okay.
Is affected, and therefore, if they get a slight cut, they won't necessarily, the bleeding won't necessarily
That was just
stop.
the non-doctor in me connecting two things that I thought were connected.
Not at all. No, not at all. not at all. But so this young U.S. Marine, like I say, I think they transfused over 30 units of blood. It might have even been, you know.
Wow. What's a unit usually?
So
like
unit's
pint?
about
What we call
half.
a pint, I guess.
Yeah, about half a liter. So.
Oh wow. Okay.
You
So,
know.
yeah.
So staggering, really. And you know the average circulating volume for an adult again is around about I want to say let me quote this right, I want to say about 10 pints, so you know about sort of
wow.
5 liters, so several times the circulating volume needs to be sort of transfused. Personally, I didn't fancy his chances initially, you know, but you know, but he was in. Then they did the demonstration surgery in the operating theatre and did things they needed to do. He was transferred to the intensive care facility, and literally on day 3, he was right as rain, chatting, joking. You know, I couldn't believe it. Tim, you know, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, and obviously, you know, it's very life-changing injuries. I think, as I understand, there was an automatic, you know, the US military, you know, look after their injured, and there was something like an automatic $250,000 sort of payout that kind of works. Although, you know, when you think about injuries like that, you know, that's not going to be enough to sustain a 20-something in early 20s until, you know, so that was, I hope, just the beginning. But yeah, it was amazing time, and to be part of something, part of a team like that in that kind of environment was very special. And we, you know, we just had to do what we did. Of course, you know, you became a little desensitized. Although we had Camp Bastion was, like say, in the middle of a desert, and they had Camp 1 had the 4-mile perimeter. Now the Americans were just building what we call Camp Bastion 2, sort of right next door, and that was still sort of getting established at that time. And again, you know, some amazing facilities and things that they had. But yeah, as I say, it was amazing times. I even managed to persuade my logistics staff to be able to take a bit of training equipment over, so I had an extra bag with some focus mitts and Tide pads.
There we go.
Sticks.
So that answered the next question, which was martial arts before or after? So clearly you were involved. You got involved in martial arts before you were.
Yeah, as a kid, funnily enough, you know, I suppose my earliest sort of experiences, you know, I must have seen something on, you know, as children, you were exposed to different cartoons and different programs and different shows, and I remember just kind of goofing around, like, and pulling moves. I had no clue what I was doing, you know, as you do, you know, as a typical, you know, innocent sort of 7 or 8 year old. But I remember there's this one photo where I can sort of, you know, chuckle about, you know, of course I had an older brother, so he kind of kept me on my toes. But my dad did kind of get some, he did bring us some, in those days we had video, you know, it's kind of giving my age away now.
Well, I remember the first VCRs. I think I'm a little older than you, but yeah, I remember the first VCRs. So yeah, I mean, I'll bet you there were ones around before me, but let's put it this way: the first consumer ones that people were starting to put into their homes. Those I remember, early 1980s.
That sounds very familiar, because I think and like we my brother and I, we just loved the VCR, and we had you know, so many video, like different things. But especially when the Star Wars films, I think, you know, as a child you always remember that one film you watched again and again and again. I think for me it was Return of the Jedi over 100 times or something extraordinary. But
and then he had broomsticks and played sword fights. Yeah.
Dare I admit to that? But Dad interestingly did bring some Bruce Lee movies home, and of course, again, as a child, I didn't really quite fully understand, you know, what I was seeing, and probably was a bit young to be watching them. But certainly left an impression. And then, and I remember trying a karate class when I was, again, I want to say when I was 7 or 8, and I didn't have the greatest experience. It seemed a bit shouty and a bit sort of, I don't know. didn't seem like a very friendly environment, you know, and
yeah.
of course it probably wasn't meant to be, because it was meant to be discipline and all of that stuff.
Right.
You know?
Which there's many definitions of, but that's what people thought that
That's
was
exactly
at that time.
at that time. Exactly. So that kind of put me off a little bit. But then it was around sort of 12, 13, and I found another karate club. I thought I'm going to try it again. This was Shotokan, and then I did a couple of classes and I enjoyed it. I thought, this is okay. I think I can do all right here. And then it was interesting, but I remember having this sort of feeling that I'm not gonna quit this until I get a black belt. I'm gonna keep going with this, or I sort of made myself a goal. And interestingly, the instructor at the time, he was a high-ranking brown belt, and I think again, there's so many different organizations within that, and I think he just switched from one to another. So, and then he did become a black belt sort of during my early sort of days, I suppose, early or within the first year or so of me training. But they hadn't then produced any other black belts at that time, So, but about 4.5 years later, I was 17, and I'd been training very hard and very diligently, and been a brown belt, or first Q, in the Shotokan. They had like the stripes we have nowadays, but they call it Q grades.
Q, yeah. I mean, I wrote an article actually on the Melmag Martial Art Lifestyle magazine page, basically, with articles about the history of belts. And it's like all your under black belt ranks were called Q, at least in Japanese. And then all the black belt ones were called Dan.
That's it. Yeah. Exactly. I just wasn't sure if this was entirely.
Hopefully they've read the article.
So we're all right there. We're all right. So it's kind of strange, because sometimes in some systems brown belt could be third Q, or sometimes it's second Q.
Yeah.
And then with the stripe it's first Q and so forth. And
then like even some Korean systems would put a red in there, either in addition to the brown or in place of the brown. Then in Japanese systems, red was the highest. And
that's right, and I think there's a little bit of...
Makes everyone confused.
That's it, and funny you should say that, because I think even in Judo, the red belt is the highest.
Yeah.
However, in the British Judo, in the children, they have red in the children's grading. And as I understand, the IJF, International Judo Federation, the Japanese don't really like it.
Right. And this concludes the abbreviated version of the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast. Please click the like and subscribe buttons, as well as the notification bell. Also consider subscribing to the full-length podcast at www.patreon.com/malmag, or purchasing individual full-length episodes at malmag.gumroad.com. Thank you for listening to this episode with Sid Siddiqui. Coming up next week is our 50th episode with special guests Kathy Long and Restita De Jesus. Tune in for a great show. Check out the Melmag store at www.martialartslifestylemagazine.com and click on the store tab. There, you will find a full selection of Timmy B's brand sticks for FMA and Krabi Krabong, as well as Timmy B's and Dos Manos t-shirts. Many more products coming soon. Also click on our courses tab to purchase online courses, right now featuring a course in the Dos Manos stick of FMA. More courses to come. This show is produced by Martial Arts Lifestyle Magazine. Visit us at www.martialartslifestylemagazine.com and enjoy the free version of our online magazine with articles, a recommended schools page, and a worldwide events calendar. Music by Jack Al Relic. Martial Arts Lifestyle Magazine and the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast are trademarked and copyrighted by TNT LLC.